Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So you've just been briefed in that extremely somber briefing on the latest integrated food security phase classification report. And I'd like to add that the Secretary General said this morning that the report's findings on food insecurity in Gaza are an appalling indictment of conditions on the ground for civilians. He said that more than half of all Palestinians in Gaza, 1.1 million people, have completely exhausted their food supplies and are facing catastrophic hunger, according to the report. This is an entirely man-made disaster, the Secretary General emphasized, and the report makes clear that it can be halted. The Secretary General calls on the Israeli authorities to ensure complete and unfettered access for humanitarian goods throughout Gaza, and for the international community to fully support our humanitarian efforts. Meanwhile, the Commissioner General for the UN Relief and Works Agency, Philippe Lazzarini, said that the Israeli authorities had denied his entry to Gaza today. In light of the report showing that famine is imminent in the northern Gaza Strip, Mr. Lazzarini said that he had tried to visit Gaza today to coordinate and improve the humanitarian response. He noted that UNRWA has by far the largest presence among all humanitarian organizations in Gaza. The Commissioner General said that too much time has been wasted and all land crossings must open now. Famine can be averted with political will, he said. And an update on the humanitarian front, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that intense Israeli bombardment and ground operations, as well as heavy fighting between Israeli forces and Palestinian armed groups, continue to be reported across much of the Gaza Strip, particularly in Deir al-Bala and near Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City in the north. Despite the ongoing hostilities and other impediments, we and our humanitarian partners are trying to get life-saving aid to civilians in Gaza wherever and whenever we can. Last night, the World Food Programme delivered 18 truckloads of food supplies, including wheat flour, food parcels, and ready-to-eat rations to Gaza City via a new route along the border. OCHA said this route needs to be made available for daily convoys so that we can have consistent and safe access to the north. Meanwhile, the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, said that he is terribly worried about the situation at Al-Shifa Hospital, which is endangering civilians, both patients and health workers. He reiterated that hospitals should never be battlegrounds and must be protected. On Saturday, a WHO team visited the European Gaza Hospital in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza to bring medical supplies for some 80,000 patients and assess water, sanitation, and hygiene capacities at the facility. And on Sunday, WHO, UNRWA, and the UN Mine Action Service delivered some 10,500 liters of fuel to Nasser Hospital, also in Khan Yunis. While there, they evaluated safety concerns and assessed conditions for the resumption of essential services. This morning, the Secretary General spoke at the Security Council open debate on nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. He said that almost 8 decades after the incineration of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, nuclear weapons still represent a clear and present danger to global peace and security. Today, he added, we meet at a time when geopolitical tensions and mistrust have escalated the risk of nuclear warfare to its highest point in decades. Humanity cannot survive a sequel to Oppenheimer, the Secretary General told members of the Security Council. He said that September's Summit of the Future and the pact that will emerge will be an important moment for the world to gather around concrete reforms to the global disarmament architecture and the bodies and institutions that uphold it. He also told Council members that they have an opportunity to lay down a marker, to look beyond today's divisions and state clearly that living with the existential threat of nuclear weapons is unacceptable. The full remarks are online. On Colombia, I have the following. The Secretary General takes note of President Gustavo Petro's decision to suspend the bilateral ceasefire between the government and the armed group known as EMC in several departments in Colombia. He condemns the latest acts of violence against indigenous communities that prompted this decision and calls on armed groups to cease immediately all such hostilities against the civilian population. We have a humanitarian update on the situation in Haiti. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says the delivery of humanitarian assistance to people in Port-au-Prince continues despite the tense and volatile situation in the capital. On Saturday, UNICEF reported that one of its containers was looted at Port-au-Prince's main port. The container held essential items for maternal, neonatal, and child authorities to secure them. Meanwhile, since early March, the World Food Programme has delivered 115,000 hot meals to people displaced in the capital. On the health front, the Hôpital Université La Paix, the only public hospital in Port-au-Prince with the capacity to treat trauma, continues to operate with support from the Pan-American Health Organization and the World Health Organization. The hospital has activated its mass casualty plan to increase its capacity to receive more patients. On displacement, the Internal Organization for Migration says in a new survey that in addition to creating displacement within the capital area, attacks and insecurity are pushing more and more people to leave the capital to find refuge in provinces, taking the risk of passing through gang-controlled routes. From March 8th to March 14th, IOM said nearly 17,000 people left the capital. More than half of them are heading towards the Grand Sud departments. Our colleagues tell us that the region has already hosts more than 116,000 people who fled the metropolitan area of Port-au-Prince in recent months. Turning to Ukraine, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that humanitarian organizations continue to support communities impacted by the recent attacks on the cities of Odessa and Mykolaiv in the south of the country. According to humanitarian partners on the ground, the attacks have killed and injured dozens of civilians over the past 3 days. Homes, as well as gas and electricity facilities, were also affected. In Odessa and Mykolaiv, humanitarian workers quickly mobilized, providing first aid, meals for the affected people and rescuers, and psychological support. Aid organizations distributed repair materials to cover immediate damage and are engaging in support for larger scope repairs and multi-purpose cash assistance. Kharkiv and Sumy regions, east and northeast of Ukraine, were also attacked. Over the past few days, humanitarian organizations delivered emergency shelter kits to the impacted communities. Civilian infrastructure sustained damage, including in the Velika Pizarivka community, where more than a dozen houses, a preschool, and a hospital were damaged in an attack on the 17th of March. Moving to South Sudan, where our peacekeeping mission, UNMISS, released its quarterly report on violence affecting civilians today. The report indicates a surge in intercommunal violence across the country from October to December 2023. A total of 233 incidents were documented during these months, with 862 victims either killed, injured, abducted, or subjected to conflict-related sexual violence. Warab State was the main hotspot, with a steep 87% spike in victims as compared to the previous quarter. The report specifies that more than half of those affected by overall subnational violence were caught up in retaliatory attacks related to the ongoing dispute between Dinka Twik Mayardit in Warab and Dinka Ngok communities in the Abyei region. UNMISS continues to proactively protect civilians through patrols and swift deployments of temporary operating bases in conflict locations. But urgent intervention by national, state, and local authorities is required to resolve underlying grievances and build sustained peace, says Nicholas Haysom, the Secretary General's Special Representative for South Sudan. And you will have seen that on Saturday we issued a statement in which the Secretary General condemned an incident in which 8 peacekeepers of the UN mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo were wounded. This happened during fighting between the M23 and the Congolese armed forces in the area of Sake, 20 kilometers from Goma, the provincial capital of North Kivu. The wounded peacekeepers were deployed as part of Operation Springbok, launched in November to protect civilians in the area. Today, our peacekeeping colleagues say the mission is maintaining its blocking positions while clashes have continued in the area of Sake. The full statement is online. And over the weekend, the special envoy of the Secretary General for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, held meetings with senior American officials in Washington, D.C. During the meetings, Mr. Grunberg reiterated the Secretary General's calls for de-escalation in the region and the Red Sea. The special envoy emphasized the paramount importance of sustaining regional and international concerted support to the parties to finalize a UN roadmap that operationalizes their commitments to a nationwide ceasefire, measures to improve living conditions in Yemen, and the resumption of a political process to reach an inclusive and sustainable settlement of the conflict. And you'll see on our schedule that there are some stakeouts this afternoon. Any questions for me? Yes, Basim.
other journalists also were detained, and broadcast equipment was destroyed. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, we stand against any harassment of journalists anywhere in the world, and certainly we do so in this instance. Our sympathies go to your colleague as well as to all the other journalists who suffered from any violence during the course of this incident. Yes, Amelie.
Thanks, Farhan. I have several questions. You mentioned Philippe Lazzarini being denied entry into Gaza. Is there any comment from the Secretary General about this decision from the Israeli Authority?
Well, the Secretary General believes that all UN officials, including Mr. Lazzarini and his colleagues in UNRWA, should have access to do the vital humanitarian work that they do, and certainly he wants Mr. Lazzarini to have access throughout the areas in which UNRWA operates.
Sorry.
And you had one more?
Yeah,
Okay.
on Haiti, if I may.
Sure.
Last week, BNU announced an air bridge between Dominican Republic and Port-au-Prince. They posted some photo in social media this morning showing that it started. Can you give us any kind of update on this air bridge, what it's doing in one way and the other?
Yes, we have been informed by our colleagues on the ground that the air bridge, the connection of regular air transit between the Dominican Republic and Haiti has begun. It's just the first flights so far, but we hope that there will be a more regular travel of helicopters so that we can have improved access to Port-au-Prince. And so we're continuing with that, and we hope that all of the authorities and all the parties on the ground will cooperate with our efforts. Edie, and then after that, Kristen.
A quick follow-up to that, was this a round-trip flight or a one-way flight?
I believe it was a round-trip flight, but we can check with our colleagues on that.
I have a few questions. First, where is Sigrid Kaag, and what is she doing in reaction to this report?
She's on the ground in the region, so she's been traveling to areas of Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory as needed.
And does the Secretary General have any comment to North Korea's recent missile test today as he was addressing the Security Council on Disarmament and Non-Proliferation?
Well, I mean, you've seen what we've said before on this, that the Secretary General has consistently called for de-escalation, the full implementation of relevant Security Council resolutions, an environment that's conducive to dialogue, and the resumption of talks, and of course we want to make sure that you can achieve the verifiable denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Deji? Oh, sorry, Kristen first, and then Deji.
Thanks, Farhan. On Gaza, you mentioned that I think it was 18 trucks got into northern Gaza using this new route yesterday. You also said there's a lot of fighting in northern Gaza. I'm wondering if you can describe the coordination, what conditions the aid deliveries, what were they facing when they went in there? Were they subject to any?
Whenever we do aid deliveries, we deal, of course, with Israel as the occupying power, but also with all of the de facto forces on the ground to ensure that there's deconfliction, so that everyone knows where our convoy is going through, and everyone is committed to making sure that the convoy is kept safe. So we do that just as our standard procedure, and we're doing that here. It seems to have worked in this case with the 18 trucks, but again, as our colleagues in the briefing just before me pointed out, we need much more transit. Basically, our estimate is we need about 500 trucks, which is what was happening pre-October 7th, going in to the area. And if we can get it up to that level, we could still avert a famine. But that involves having much more traffic and many more crossing points open by road.
And just quick follow-up, who is distributing that aid once the trucks get into northern Gaza?
We have local partners on the ground that would help with the distribution. Deji.
Two quick follow-up. First on Lazzarini. He got denied by Israel to enter in Gaza Strip. Does the Israeli government tell the UN or Mr. Lazzarini the reason, the exact reason? Because of this is a, quote, terrorist group?
Well, no.
So not
I
that
think
reason.
it would be up to you to ask the Israeli officials and their body on the ground, Kogat, about what their reasoning is.
But you didn't get
from our standpoint, we're not aware of any valid reason for this. But they can explain to you what the reason for their action was.
Okay, the second follow-up. Just now my colleague asked you about the Al Jazeera correspondent. You said you showed sympathy to him. But do you urge the authority to release him to respect the freedom of press?
We believe that journalists who are detained in the course of their reporting duties should be released.
And my question now, obviously we saw the statement about the Russian presidential election on the four oblasts in Ukraine, that the Secretary General condemned the decision to do that. But generally speaking, now we have the victory of Mr. Putin will be the next Russian president. What is the general position of the United Nations, especially Secretary General, on this very election as a whole?
We don't have any comment on the election as a whole. The comments we made on Friday are the comments we have about some of what was happening in the course of these elections. But an overall comment we don't have. On the question of the government, of course, we continue to interact with the government and we'll keep doing so.
So will Secretary General reach out for President Putin?
Once a government is put in place, we'll follow the standard procedures in terms of dealing with that government. Yes, Stefano.
Thank you, Farhan. We just next week. So at this extraordinary time, shouldn't the Secretary General take extraordinary action?
He is doing what he can. We will also have, in the coming days, different things to report to you concerning where he's going and what he's doing. But certainly the Secretary General believes extraordinary action needs to be taken first and foremost by the Israeli authorities in terms of the requests we've continually made for greater access, but also a greater involvement by the international community in making sure that the people of Gaza can be fed.
Would, just a quick follow-up, will we consider it extraordinary action of a lead an aid convoy into Gaza himself a risk at all?
The Secretary General is looking at things that are feasible and are helpful, and he will do whatever he can along those lines.
And then another question. Yes, President Putin won the election yesterday. Did the Secretary General, does he send message of congratulation in these cases or not?
Well, as I informed Deji, we have a standard procedure in terms of how we respond to elections and new leaders, and we'll follow that. Beyond that, we don't really have a comment on this.
And then, if you allow me, I just heard this morning a report from BBC, was on the radio, a very disturbing report about in Oman, where several women from Malawi that were sent there to work in domestic jobs, they basically been enslaved. They cannot go back home. They are sexually abused. It was a report from BBC again. And do you know anything about this?
Well, these are the sort of conditions that are examined by the International Labour Organization. And we try to make sure that all countries have fair labor conditions, including for migrant laborers. And we call on them to do so. Yes, in the back. No, no, no. I meant you, Yvonne. Yes.
Thanks,
I-
Farhad. Sorry, I wasn't sure you were pointing at me or not. My question on Haiti, what is the Secretary General's current thinking on the multinational security force? Is he still holding out hope, or does he now see that as something that's not going to happen?
Well, obviously we're aware of the delays, but the swift deployment of the multinational force remains critical to ensure that the political and security tracks can advance in parallel, as only complementary efforts can be successful. And our office on the ground, BNU, will continue to support Haiti on its path towards the restoration of democratic institutions. But certainly it's important that the multinational force can be deployed as quickly as possible.
Okay, but is he still, that sounds like he's still thinking that this is going to happen. So he's still hopeful that it's a possibility, given that there's no government now.
It's something that's needed. And obviously it's been delayed for different factors of which we're all aware. But it's essential in order that there be security on the ground. And of course, it's also essential that the stakeholders in Haiti put aside their own differences. They need to take immediate action on the implementation of the transitional governance arrangements that were agreed upon last week. And that hopefully will help move things along if that agreement can be reached.
Okay, can I just ask one more question on Haiti? What's the Secretary General saying to the US authorities with regard to the flow of weapons from US gun manufacturers, arms manufacturers to Haiti? What is his position on that, and what is he saying to the US authorities?
Well, we certainly want all weapons to be removed from the picture in Haiti. So we don't want a greater flow of weapons into the country. And it's important for all governments to be aware of that, and we press that. As for the U.S. And the other members of the Security Council will get a briefing on Haiti this afternoon. There'll be a private meeting of the Security Council on Haiti, and Maria Isabel Salvador, our special representative, is expected to brief the Council at that point. Yes, Edie.
Just one more follow-up question on Mr. Lazzarini. Was this the first time that he attempted to go into Gaza after the allegations that some UNRWA members participated on October 7th on the attacks?
He's been to Gaza since the October 7th attacks, and we've mentioned it to you that he's been there before. So this was, but in terms of specific allegations at different times, I mean, those have been in place for some time now, as you're aware. But certainly this is the first time of those that he's been denied entry into Gaza. The previous times he had been. And with that, okay, one more, and then.
Yeah, this is not something you can answer, but I just want to put this on record. I just want to complain something.
That I can answer.
I want to complain something. Okay. I tried to send 2 postcards from UNPD in this building, next to the East River, which is Long Island City. It's been 2 months. Mm-hmm. It's nowhere to receive those postcards. I actually asked some of my friends. They try to send postcards from this location out there to China and to somewhere else. They didn't receive those cards.
I think check with the people at the postal office below.
They told me. They said they will send all those postcards. Once outside this building, it will be handled by USPS.
In that case, it should be in the hands of the U.S. Postal Service.
So they lost all the cards? I mean, it's 100% now.
I don't know. I don't speak for the U.S. Postal
Okay.
Service. Okay. All right. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Earlier today, the UN Security Council held a ministerial briefing on nuclear nonproliferation and disarmament, and one of the speakers was Dr. Robert Floyd, the Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. Dr. Floyd will say a few words, and then we'll take any questions you may have for him.
Today I address the UN Security Council, and I'd first like to thank the Foreign Minister of Japan, Foreign Minister Kamikawa, for the invitation and for the Japanese leadership on this matter. This comes at a critical point in the whole global peace and security context, a critical point for the non-proliferation and disarmament architecture. And it was encouraging to hear strong statements of support from so many of the Security Council members. I previously addressed the Security Council nearly 2.5 years ago, and so I did emphasize some of the things that have changed since last time. Last time there was 185 state signatories, now 187 out of a possible 196. This is near universal support. Last time, 170 ratifications of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, the CTBT. Now, 178. Now remember, that's in the context of a rather high-profile de-ratification last year, but -1 is in the context of +9. The flow of the states is clear. Since last time, we've seen 2 states complete all of their monitoring stations in their country. We have 337 facilities around the world, now more than 90% established. But Argentina and the Russian Federation both completed all of the stations that they're responsible for in their territory in the last 2.5 years. We've been focusing on making sure that the smallest of states are able to access the CTBT data for their own purposes, for their training, and also for natural disaster management. The final thing that I would emphasize that has changed since last time, public awareness is at a higher level, in part due to the Oppenheimer movie, but anxiety is probably at a much higher level too. Anxiety of states that they're concerned that some states may use a nuclear weapon, that there's an accumulation of high enriched uranium for purposes that are a little hard to understand, that there is increased activity at some of the former test sites around the world. So what hasn't changed since I spoke to the Security Council in 2021? What hasn't changed is that the CTBT continues to support the global norm against testing. Countries have committed to a moratorium on testing, and our data and monitoring system enables every country to know that the states are actually maintaining that with integrity. That has not changed. The success of the treaty has not changed. There's been less than a dozen nuclear tests since the treaty was open for signature in 1996. Before that, 2,000 tests. Fortunately, no tests since I last addressed the Security Council. What has not changed is a call for a permanent ban and a legally binding ban on nuclear testing. That chorus from states is loud, clear, and ever louder. So to be clear, I'm here today to have the opportunity to brief the Security Council and everyone watching here on a number of aspects. The geopolitical landscape is unstable, leads to anxiety, and there are many concerns, that is for sure. The non-proliferation and disarmament architecture must be protected and strengthened in this current context. The CTBT has already been a great success in seeing almost the end to nuclear testing in the 27 years that the treaty has been open for signature. And we also face an opportunity now to do something for the next generation. That there could be hope of a world without nuclear tests and a world without nuclear weapons. That we could leave this world in a better place by finishing the job before us and seeing this treaty enter into force and all of its verification mechanisms becoming available, that all could sleep better at night. It is possible that we can still move to that, And we at the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization are absolutely resolute in our commitment towards that end. Be very happy to take your questions. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Yvonne Mariotti, News. We heard the Secretary General today talk about it being at the highest point in decades with regard to geopolitical tensions and the threat of nuclear conflict, accidental or otherwise. Can you give us your thoughts on his views? And also, can you do a comparison with what we're facing today with the height of the Cold War and the threat of nuclear conflict at that time?
The Secretary General made a very powerful statement in the Security Council and highlighted the concerns in the current geopolitical circumstance. There is no way that I would ever diminish his sober assessment. Many of us that have worked in this space thought that we would never be in a context where there was a question about use of nuclear weapons, weapons that were meant to be for deterrence only. And yet, that is where we are now. That is a reason that I would say, yes, it is a concerning circumstance. How that compares to the height or the end of the Cold War is a bit harder to make a reference point, but the important point is this is a significant point in time now that there is concern about the possibility that we could face use of nuclear weapons. That is not good for anyone.
Just a bit of a reality check. What would you actually expect the Security Council to do in limiting the use of nuclear weapons? You, in a room where you have China, which kind of shields North Korea in their nuclear testing, and so does Russia as an enabler. What, in reality, can you expect? I mean, you use the word hope. Hope is not really much there. There's not much substance.
Today was a briefing of the Security Council. It was not about a resolution. It was not about there being a specific decision. It was a critical opportunity to be able to brief all of the members of the Security Council, permanent and non-permanent members, about the state of non-proliferation and disarmament architecture, and in my responsibility specifically about the CTBT. It was good to see that they could see the success and that it's not all doom and gloom. But it wasn't set for a decision to be taken at the Security Council, but more for them to think about the context and where leadership and statesmanship could play as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sinan. I'm with the Ruda Media Network. As you know, 36 years ago, Saddam Hussein regime used chemical weapons against Kurds, and he killed more than 5,000 Kurd civilians. And we didn't hear anything this morning at the Security Council. Nobody talked about Halabja. I wonder if you have any comment on that, or what's your response?
Nobody spoke about Habaksha. Somebody did, actually. But in my comments, the first picture that I painted was actually visiting Hiroshima for the anniversary celebrations, the anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima last year. And I said that we can debate issues about non-proliferation and disarmament, but when you visit Hiroshima or Nagasaki, you are confronted with the realities of the devastation of the use of a nuclear weapon. And that, I think, is very good for more people to do, and to have the opportunity to hear from the Habaksha, the survivors, that are less and less of them still, alive today, but to hear from the survivors their stories is very powerful and a very important reminder to all of us that labour towards a world without nuclear weapons. We should honour, them in our work.
Hi, I'm Catherine Huggins with Mainichi Newspapers. You spoke about the possibility of seeing a nuclear weapons-free world in my lifetime, in future generations' lifetimes. What do you think is the pathway to achieving this when you have broad consensus around the issue, but you have other states like the DPRK, like Iran, violating this because one state is enough to not have a nuclear-free world?
My responsibility is for the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and so we are looking at that step where a state would need to test a device if they were to establish a nuclear weapon capability. That is why this ban is so important, is it stops the spread of nuclear weapons to new states. It also limits the ability for states to develop different classes of weapons. It also is absolutely critical for us to get to a world without nuclear weapons. That unless you have confidence that you know if any other state is testing, it is very hard to have the confidence to then get rid of nuclear weapons. So it is a critical element in a world without nuclear weapons. The vast majority of states, in fact all states on a good day, agree with the object and purpose of the CTBT. Even Kim Jong-un has declared a suspension in his testing activities back in 2018. And North Korea has not tested since 2017. Long may that continue, but they have not committed to a moratorium like all other nuclear possessor states have done. So this again shows there is a commitment amongst even those that have nuclear weapons to a moratorium on testing. We want to keep building on that and to find the pathway in geostrategic circumstances to move towards a legally binding ban on testing, and then ultimately that as a step towards a world without nuclear weapons. Not an easy path implied in your question, but not a path which is impossible. It's worth it. Okay. Thank you all very much.